They
There's
can
often
also see people's squares.
perfect.
Should we get going?
Yes. Are there? Yeah, we're 7:02. Is there anyone left in the waiting room?
Not currently.
Okay, so yeah, let's get it underway. So good evening, everyone. My name is Jeff Leeper. I'm the City Councilor for the neighborhood, and I hope I find everyone well this evening. This is a informal meeting to take a look at a potential application for a rezoning at 166 Huron Avenue North. And I just want to take a quick look at where we are and how we got here. The Jewish Youth Library is looking at acquiring this space and moving their library in. I'll be as interested as everyone on this call to hear what the details are and what does the library actually do. And before they make an application, I wanted them to consult with the community, and so we've put together this this open house this evening, and I want to thank the Jewish Youth Library for agreeing to do that. So they haven't applied for this, and I think a number of you have written to me asking about what this process might look like moving forward. The I don't know what I don't know about this proposal. I'll be absolutely transparent. I'm open-minded to it, but when they first started talking to me about it, I shared the concerns that I know many of you share, which is, what does this mean for traffic? I absolutely don't want to see day camps and summer camps and that sort of thing happening at this location. So, some of those questions, and after hearing, there's not going to be any day camps, it's not licensed to run a daycare, things like that, I remain open-minded depending on what I hear about traffic. But I don't know what I don't know about your concerns. So I wanted to hear your questions and these folks' answers to those questions. And sometime next week, I'm going to provide them with some advice as to whether or not I could see myself supporting this application, whether I could see the community, both on the street and the broader community, supporting this application, and they'll need to make a decision about whether or not they want to pursue an actual application. If they do, the only thing that they're proposing that they're not allowed to do currently is the institutional use in what is zoned as a residential building. And as a property owner, they would have the right to ask for a rezoning. That would trigger a process in which they have to file a bunch of materials with the city. Those materials then go online. The public and internal stakeholders of the city have an opportunity to weigh in on the merits of the proposal. A planner would be on the file at the city who will determine whether or not the requested rezoning meets with the policies that the city has that guide development, and that's everything from the very high level provincial policy statement and official plan, community design plans, like whatever kind of policies we have in place. They would make a recommendation to city council as to whether or not to accept the proposal, and then that would go to a vote of planning committee, and then that recommendation from planning committee would go to council. So your input opportunities here are first tonight, and what I may hear, I may hear that I cannot see myself in any way supporting this and provide that advice to the proponent. If they do decide to proceed either with or against my advice, then that will kick off a formal consultation process when you'll be providing your feedback to the city planner. I always ask people to copy me on that feedback as well. There's often a lot of back and forth, and I would anticipate that I'd be working with the Wellington Village Community Association if there are things that we can change about the proposal that would, if it looks like it's going to move forward, that would improve it. And then you have the opportunity as we get closer to a vote to lobby me and lobby the members of the planning committee and lobby the members of city council. And then at the planning committee meeting, you'll have the opportunity to make a 5-minute presentation to the planning committee. So lots of opportunities for input. This really hasn't even started yet. They have not filed an application, and all I'm really looking to get out of tonight's meeting is to hear your questions, and then invite you to email me in the coming days, maybe by the end of Monday, with your thoughts as to whether you are open-minded to this moving ahead or not, so that I can provide these folks with some advice mid next week. I'm sorry I talked a lot there, but normally we have this isn't an official planning process, so it's a little loosier than usual, and there's no city planner on the file who can sort of take you through the process. Fiona, how is tonight going to work? And go ahead and kick it off, and we'll make sure to introduce the folks who are here.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Jeff. So I was saying, as I admitted people right at 7, that there's some housekeeping technicalities to go through. So tonight we're in a Zoom meeting format. So you will notice that you are muted, although you do have your ability to show your video. No need to turn on your video if you don't want to. If you want to, you're more than welcome to. Very shortly, I'm going to turn it over to the applicants team, or potential applicants team, and they're going to run through a very brief presentation. After that, we're going to turn it over to a Q&A. So right now, you'll notice that in the chat function, if you're on a desktop, the chat should be at the bottom of your screen. I believe it's at the bottom if you're on mobile or iPad as well. Hopefully you see a little one red, because I just put a message in the chat right now. If you want to send us some feedback on this, I put our email addresses there. So when we're ready for the Q&A, I'm going to ask you to put the Q&A questions into the chat. Right now, you can only message us as hosts, but I'm going to switch that so that everyone will be able to see the questions. I'm going to read the questions out loud in the order that I read them, and I'm going to omit repeated questions. So if I see the same question 3 times, we're going to read it and answer it the first time. I'm going to skip over the next ones. When you're inputting your questions into the chat for the Q&A, I'm asking you very firmly and politely to please just input questions and not comments necessarily on what you are hearing or as part of the conversation, mostly because I want to keep track of the questions and make sure that I'm not missing anything. If you have a general comment that you want me to share, I'm more than happy to do that. Maybe just start that comment with, this is a general comment, so that I know it's something you want me to read out loud and have the team comment on. That's not a problem at all. I'm just trying to avoid like internal conversation, just so that I can keep track of everything. Hopefully that makes sense. So you can message me at any point during the presentation if you have a technical question, if someone you know can't log in, or if you missed something, whatever, feel free to do that. My name's Fiona Mitchell. Hopefully you see that. When you click, in the chat, there's a to button, and you should be able to find my name and send me a message. And then when you want to submit your question for the Q&A, you just click the everyone question. And if I see a question that has come to me privately and I know it's for the panelists, I will be more than happy to read it as long as I see it. Yeah, and then afterwards, we are recording this session. So by next week or so, this will go on YouTube. And feel free to email us if you want that link to send over to a neighbor, or just to have to review some of the question and answers. So I think that is it for me. I'm going to turn it over to Foten, Nathan specifically, who will introduce the folks who are here with us tonight. Nathan.
Hi, thank you, Fiona. Can everybody hear me? Yes, excellent. Thanks, Fiona and Councillor Leeper for introducing us. I'd like to welcome everybody tonight to the meeting, and thank you for taking your time this evening to join us. And just to introduce the team, my name is Nathan Patrician. I'm a planner with Foten Planning and Design. And with me is Kirsten, who is a senior planner with Foten, and Devorah Katyak, who is a representative, founder of the Jewish Youth Library of Ottawa, and we're here on behalf of them. And we'd like to introduce 166 Huron Avenue North to you. So as many of you know, it's not letting me go to my, oh, there we are. As many of you know, 166 Huron Avenue North is a 3-story detached residential dwelling built in 1915. And as everyone knows, designed by Francis Sullivan, so quite an important building. And our client is the nonprofit charitable organization, the Jewish Youth Library of Ottawa, who, as Councillor Leeper had mentioned, are seeking to acquire the building as space to use as a library to store their books and reference collections. They will maintain their space that they currently have on Switzer Avenue, which is where most of their programming and operations goes out of. That's their primary location. But to reiterate, they are just looking to acquire this as a library for their books and materials. Current zoning does not permit a library use. It is a residential zone. So due to that, we are seeking a zoning bylaw amendment to permit a library use at this site. And we understand that it is an important building to the neighborhood and an important building on Huron Street. As many of you know, it is a designated Part 4 Heritage, Ontario Heritage Act heritage building with both exterior and interior features of significance. And to that point, it should be mentioned that no alterations are proposed for the building. It is just a rezoning to allow that library use. I can have Deborah speak a little bit later on more about the organization and specifically how the building might be used and what their programming is. But I'd like to move into just the context of the site. So as you can see from this map, 166 is located just south of Wellington Street West on Huron Avenue, just a few doors down from Wellington, and just a block over from Holland Avenue. To look a little bit more at the on the ground context, the top left corner is a photo of the site of Huron Avenue North, and the other top photo is looking across the street from the site. The neighborhood is mostly characterized by detached dwellings, residential uses, but then you can see in that bottom right-hand corner that Wellington Street West is close by, which does have commercial and retail along it. This map here shows the proximity to public transit. So as mentioned, just a few doors down from Wellington Street West, where there is an east-west bus route with bus stops on the corner of Harmer and Wellington and the corner of Holland and Wellington, and then another north-south bus route that goes down Holland Avenue with those two bus stops located there that you can see on the map. This shows a 100-meter radius, so just a few minutes walk, and then not shown on the map is Tunney's Pasture, the LRT station, which is 600 meters or about a 10-minute walk from the site. And then here is a zoning map, just showing that the site is located within the residential third density zone. The yellow dots there indicate that there is the heritage overlay applied to this site, as it is a Part 4 heritage designated building. And just to reiterate, we are planning on maintaining the residential zoning for the site, but only looking to include the library use as a use that can be allowed here. I can now pass it over to Devorah, who can speak a little bit more about the Jewish Youth Library.
Thank you, Nathan. That was excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, Kirsten. My name is Deborah Katak, and my husband and I are the co-founders of the Jewish Youth Library, which is a registered nonprofit charitable organization that was started in the 80s. I just want to take this opportunity to thank Councillor Jeff Leeper and his very able assistant, Fiona, and along with our urban planners, Nathan and Kirsten from Fontaine and Jeff Powley. What is the Jewish Youth Library? When my husband, who is a frontline healthcare worker, a physician at the Ottawa General, and I moved to Ottawa in 1981, besides, I'm a professional teacher, my husband's a physician, we wanted to contribute something to the community, wanted to contribute something positive. So we co-founded the Jewish Youth Library as a registered charitable nonprofit organization. In 1989, the Jewish Youth Library purchased a very beautiful property at 192 Switzer Avenue, by the way, which is exactly across the street from my house, so I can never be late to work, okay? Even in a snowstorm, there's no snow days for me. It was recently renovated, and our camp, our day camp, and our licensed daycare is there. We are not moving those programs. We have put in $200,000 worth of renovations into the Switzer property. It is all preschool. It's state-of-the-art preschool. We have an outdoor, beautiful pool for our camp. There is no room for a daycare, and there is no room for a camp on Huron Avenue. To have a daycare, you need 30 square feet outside yard space to be licensed. The yard at Huron is very small. So even if we wanted to, we would never get a license and it would never be approved. The only thing that we want to move to Huron Avenue is our small community library. We have a beautiful selection and rare collection. Some are rare, some are regular books of English and Hebrew books, and everything from history to parenting to geography to Canadian history, every topic we have. Now, some neighbors have asked that will the library just be used for the Jewish community, or will it be open to the public? And it will absolutely be open to the neighborhood and will absolutely be open to the community to use. And we would be so delighted to have input from the neighborhood on the programs that you would love us to do that are part and parcel of a library. We would love the input. We understand that people are concerned about traffic. We understand this. And what we would like to do, and we have talked it over with our urban planners, how to address that, is that we would like to put bike racks on the side of the building to encourage people to ride their bikes. Also, many of our members live nearby. They plan on walking. Wellington Village is a walking neighborhood, which makes it so beautiful. I mean, from my house in Switzer, which is Carling Kirkwood, to the Huron, if I'm walking really fast, it's 25 minutes. If I'm jogging, it's 15 minutes. But weather permitting, it would be very lovely to use our bike. We are also going to promote public transit. One of our donors has agreed to donate a significant amount of money to help families in need who would need a bus ticket or light rail to help them get to the Huron property. And if people do drive, we will request that they park on Wellington Street. We understand, we want to respect our neighbors. And lastly, on the Huron property does have a long driveway. There are 8 to 10, we measured it. There's 8 to 10 spots on the driveway, which can be used. Like I said, we do not want to move the daycare to the property. I understand there was a letter that was sent around, and it was unfortunate that someone didn't speak to us beforehand, but we do not want to move our daycare to the Huron property, and it's just not big enough, and we're not allowed to. So that settles that. And the same thing with our camp. The Jewish Youth Library would like to have the rezoning approved to be able to put our beautiful books into this home that has heritage status. And that designation is a communal trust, really. And that's something that we would take very seriously. We would make this, this heritage home available to the neighborhood and community. And as a small community library, the JYL enriches the tapestry of our community and creates bridges of understanding and builds strong bonds. You know, today there's so much divisiveness in the community and society, and libraries build bridges by promoting heritage and culture, and through education, the JYL would enables the sharing of knowledge and ideas amongst community members of all ages and abilities and faiths. And this small community library will enhance the neighborhood and enhance the community by being an equalizer of kindness and goodness. And just to finish, because I know I'm not supposed to speak that long, I looked up Wikipedia and I said, what is a library? And it was spot on. According to Wikipedia, a library is a curated collection of sources of information and similar resources selected by experts and made accessible to a defined community for reference or borrowing, often in a quiet environment conducive to study. I thought that is so beautiful. I had to share it with you. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and look forward to hearing from everybody.
Okay, so it looks like we're ready to move into the Q&A. So now the Q&A, if you type something into the Q&A for everyone, everyone will see it, not just me. I just want to remind folks to keep things appropriate and as polite and respectful as possible. So I had one question come into me privately to start off with as I let you folks type in your questions. So the first question, if it is just a library, why does the pamphlet left in my mailbox today speak about wellness programs, after school programs for dance, drop-in sessions for moms and toddlers, etc.?
Would you like me to answer that?
Yep, I'm just going to read them, and whoever's the most appropriate, feel free to answer.
Okay, these are programs of a library. These are programs that a community, a neighborhood could benefit from. This is for neighborhood, for people walking, you know, in the neighborhood. This is what enhances a community.
Thank you. Once the property is rezoned, can it be limited to a library, or can it become anything it wants once rezoned?
I can speak to that. So, sorry, excuse me. I think a lot of people are probably used to hearing through development, you know, okay, so a developer wants one thing, and so they're changing the zoning completely. But we do understand, and the Jewish Youth Library understands the importance of this heritage resource, and as a residential contributor to the neighborhood. So in this case, we would be seeking just to maintain the existing residential zoning. So that permits, you know, some residential zoning right now. There's a list of uses that can be done, and then to only add the library use. So it wouldn't mean that you could do anything more that's institutional or commercial. It would just be to add that library use, and that's it.
Kirsten, is that set? Is there a defined permitted use that is called library?
Well, let me look it up really quickly. That's a great question. I'm going to check. So Councillor Lieber's asking because the zoning bylaw provides a wide range of definitions, but for some uses it groups them into more just common, you know, like commercial or retail. And so I'm just going to look very quickly because as Councillor Lieber's question, it actually does mean, yeah, there is a library, so it's defined as a public lending library. So of course, but through a zoning bylaw amendment, you can seek to clarify these definitions or to really kind of shrink wrap them to what you want to do. And so we do have the opportunity to use this definition or to perhaps provide more, I guess, like I said, meaning around what it would actually entail.
Thank you. There's a kind of follow-up question from the previous question. Someone's saying, aren't there associated library community programs? And I believe Devorah spoke to that a little bit already. And then the person who asked the first question is not satisfied with the response. So Doug, if you want to clarify what information or what your intent of your question was, feel free to put that in the chat so we can make sure that that's clarified. Okay, so just so folks know, just as this goes on, some of you are messaging me privately and some of you are messaging everyone. I would encourage you just to message everyone in case someone wants to like read and review the questions, or if they missed it and then they started tuning in and they're trying to figure out what we're answering. It's no problem if you choose not to do it that way, but that's my ideal approach.
Fiona, if I may, I suspect some of that is because it's not always evident to whom you're typing a comment. There's a blue button above the input field that will either say like you're sending it to Fiona Mitchell or you're sending it to everyone. So you have a choice of how you send that.
Thanks for the clarification, Jeff. Okay, so can there be a limit on the number of people in the building?
I think we would have to follow the bylaws with that.
Yeah, and so following up on that, when you do change a use, so from residential to institutional, there will be a building permit process or review to ensure that there's safety measures as per the use. So that'd be through the building code services at the City of Ottawa, and that would put a limit on the number of people because it would be non-residential at that point in the institutional. So much like you go into a community room in a community center and there's a limit on the number of people there, the same thing would apply here.
That tends to be driven by fire though, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, for safety measures.
Thank you. How many members use the library?
We imagine that there would probably be about 10 to 12 people a day coming to use the library. That's from previous statistics. So that's what we would imagine.
Thank you. Okay, 2 questions. What are the hours of operation of the library expected to be? And number 2, are there any more details available on the expected availability for use by the general public, for example, meeting rooms?
Oh, we definitely would like it open to the community and neighborhood. Like we really want to be there for the neighborhood. And the hours, that's something that we have to work out with our board. I mean, we hope to have it, really convenient hours for people.
Okay, thank you. Our concern relates to the value of property. Will this development / community center decrease the value of our property?
Well, we cannot say that. Property values are not affected by planning decisions. And since there's no change in the actual building itself, I would not anticipate, but I am not a market research expert whatsoever. So that's my disclaimer, but I don't believe there's been any findings that this would affect property values.
Thank you. Okay. Devora, we found it inappropriate and unsafe that you came to us while we were picking up our packages outside today to discuss the letter we received in our mailbox. It is a lockdown and safety is extremely important to us. As residents, we see the traffic that occurs and blocks from our street do occur during 2 high traffic periods in the day. How can you prevent from adding to these blockages? Do you feel bike racks and hope individuals will park on Wellington will be enough?
That's what we're going to be promoting. We certainly hope that people, I think that's something that the city promotes also. Using public transit, walking, biking. Those are all things that are really promoted by the city.
Okay, thank you. What do you mean by friendly neighborhood community programs?
We would love to hear input from the community. If there was, libraries have programs for seniors or for young children, reading clubs, story time, things that promote literacy. We would just love to hear the input from the community and help that way.
Thank you. Next question, please provide your data about current parking demands at Switzer and projected. As well, will multiple bike racks added to the outside of the building keep with heritage and other zoning restrictions?
So I can speak to that. There has been a traffic consultant. We've been speaking with a traffic consultant who attended the pre-consultation meeting regarding this potential application. So that's something that they would look at to understand that current parking supply and demand based on and in reflection of what the library would use, and would provide some data so that everybody can understand what changes there may or may not be on the parking demand, both on, sorry, this is for Switzer, my apologies. I think this is something we could speak to Devorah about. As Devorah had mentioned, this is a completely different use than the daycare and the day camp program. And Devorah, I'm not sure, you said that the Jewish Youth Library hasn't been, because of the renovations to 192 Switzer, I don't know if it's been operating.
Correct.
Right.
Our library, unfortunately, our beautiful collection of books has been in storage at Diamond Storage for a few years, waiting for a home.
Right. So unfortunately, it's probably not possible to get data related to the youth library, the Jewish Youth Library, from the previous Switzer location. Now for multiple bike racks and the heritage, of course, we would work with heritage staff to make sure that they're comfortable with where those bike racks would be. As Devorah mentioned, and as you know, the driveway is quite long, and there's many access points in the rear yard to put those bike parking spaces for the users.
If I may, and Kirsten, you might know this better than I think the fact that it's a heritage building, you know, that obviously raises some special considerations. If a rezoning application went through, our heritage planners would have the opportunity to take a look at the building. The designation of the building is going to be on the basis of a publicly available document called the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement. And it describes what the features are of the building that make it heritage. And the heritage planners take a look at activity on the site, the effects of rezoning, and they'll weigh in as to whether or not any of those are likely to have an impact on the attributes of the building that justify the designation of the building under the Heritage Act. So Heritage will be taking a look to make sure, basically short story, that nothing that is done is, and that includes any site plan or whatnot, that nothing is done that diminishes the attributes of the building that are considered heritage.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Even if something as small as a bike rack, because of the heritage status, does get reviewed by heritage staff.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to read this question out loud, but I think we've addressed it. If it's a library, then why will there be dance and art programs? And then following question, how many people would be joining all the other programs you plan on offering, the ones that are listed on your flyer?
I guess that would depend on the neighborhood and the community. You know, we're reaching out to people that are within walking distance or could ride their bikes or walk. So, you know, not more than what we're allowed to have in the building, because that'll be closely monitored by you know, the restrictions by the city.
I think yes, and as we mentioned too, there won't be any alterations to the building. Portions of the interior are designated, so you know, there won't be any major alterations to introduce large open rooms for gatherings, so they'll be making use of what's there. So as Devorah mentioned, you know, there will be a limit based on fire safety, and also based just out on the layout of the house as well.
That's a good point.
Kirsten, I think some of the interior actually is part of the heritage designation. Can you actually do me a big favor? Because I know you'll be able to find it quicker than I will. Can you send me the cultural heritage impact statement for this building, just from a future reference?
Yes, yeah, we'll get that.
I just want to add
Please,
that
thank you.
The outside is perfect and the inside is perfect. We're not planning on making any changes. The house was tailor-made for a beautiful library. And there's no changes that are needed, even on the inside.
That's perfect because the next question is, will the interior of the house be modified?
No, no. Yes, just bookshelves. For books.
Okay. What bylaws exist to monitor and govern the use as only a library? How can we assure it will not be used for the other programs mentioned above?
Well, I think that part of the application and part of the feedback we're receiving tonight is to understand how Deborah and the Jewish Youth Library will be moving ahead for the library use and any other potential ancillary uses associated with the library. So if we do decide to move forward, we'll clearly outline what those uses would be. And then as Councillor Leeper mentioned, the application would clearly state what those are and everybody would have an opportunity to provide their comments on it. And then for any use, so any use within the city, if you don't, if you're not sure about if somebody's doing something legally or not, or you see something happening you don't think it should be, you can always call 311 and bylaw will investigate to understand and look at the zoning and what's permitted and make a decision on what they do from there.
Yeah, for zoning violations, you can call 311. We periodically in the office have to, initiate investigations of zoning violations. You can also work with, whoever the counselor is at the time, and they can work with bylaw to investigate the violations, which is sometimes a little easier than phoning 311. And so there are a range of penalties, bylaw enforcement across the entirety of bylaw enforcement usually starts with a stop doing that warning, and then that can go all the way up to fines, orders, and fines.
This is a very tedious process to go through, like with the rezoning. You have to spend a lot of resources and a lot of time. And I just want to add, we're very law-abiding citizens. Like what we're going to apply for, that's what we're going to do.
Okay. How many library programs do you currently have running?
0, because our books are in storage.
Okay. Once the location is rezoned, what stops them from buying other buildings nearby to expand the present location for other programs?
There's...
Go ahead, Councillor.
There is nothing that theoretically stops them from doing that, but anything they purchase that is not zoned for a use has to go through this same process. Anybody who wants can purchase a building and apply to the city for permission to use that for a use other than what it is zoned as, and that kicks off the rezoning process. So the zoning on this parcel, if this moved ahead, would be strictly for this parcel. If they wanted to purchase the house next door and put it to an institutional use, they would have to apply for the same institutional zoning. So there's nothing to stop them from applying, but there's no guarantee that they would succeed.
And then similar but different question. Once it is rezoned, could the library then be sold and converted to a different commercial use?
So as I previously mentioned, we understand the sensitivity and that this is residentially zoned. So the intention is to maintain that residential zoning and only request the addition of a library use. So I would envision that if the city does support it, the zoning would be very tightly worded to only permit library and no other commercial uses whatsoever.
Thank you. A comment. It is called a youth library, but it mentions senior health programs, dance programs, drop-in sessions, art. It does not sound like a library to access books. Okay, noted.
Libraries have many programs for all ages and that promote literacy and well-being. This is done at all libraries.
Okay, how many children and or families are currently being served by your organization?
So right now, because of the pandemic, We are licensed in our daycare to have 36. We have 14 children. And during this past summer, because, you know, things were, you know, you weren't allowed to have a camp until the very last minute, we had 14 children in the camp. But the camp and the daycare are staying on Switzer Avenue and not moving to Huron.
Thank you. A question for Jeff. Jeff, does the city have parking volumes on this street? We are in the middle of a big redo of the street. There must be some numbers you can provide to us.
I think we could probably dig that up. I don't know whether they would have counted the parking. They would have counted the cars, but the publicly available parking strategy documents that were put out, what, I guess 2 years ago or so, would actually have those numbers in some detail. If you write to my office, I am more than happy to pull up those documents. But we have parking usage for everything in the neighborhood close to as of 2 years ago or so. We know that parking usage increases every year in a very busy neighborhood, but I think we can pull that up. But drop me an email.
Thank you. Will the building's integrity be compromised by a use it was not originally designed for?
I professionally can't speak to that because I'm not a construction expert, but I would entail that much like any house, it just, has regular wear and tear. But I do not know, I do not anticipate it would be compromised.
As part of the studies that you'd have to file if you were applying for rezoning, are those engineering studies part of that process?
Because there are no changes and there's no development from a construction perspective, the only study would be a servicing brief. So just ensuring that the city's servicing infrastructure for water and sanitary can handle the change in use. So because, residential uses have different needs on water demands and sanitary demands than a library use. So just ensuring that, but that would be it.
Thanks.
And on a similar note, what interior renovations or changes are planned by the JYL for the house?
So I'm sure the person who wrote that question heard the answer from before, that it's just perfect, the building. The building is perfect on the outside, perfect on the inside. There are no changes being planned. Just have bookshelves to put the books in.
Okay, another one for Jeff. Jeff, from the city's perspective, could parking in single file on one driveway count as public parking spaces? If it is rezoned, will it state how many parking spaces are needed for staff and visitors?
You know what? I might actually throw that over to Kirsten. As part of the zoning, that my understanding is that they'd be asking for it is just the permitted use. That permitted use would have zoning requirements from the city with respect to how many parking spots they have to provide. I'm going to guess it is 0 under the new rules, but Kirsten knows that better than I do. So from what I understand, they are not asking to do anything other than what the bylaw requires with respect to parking, but can you confirm that, Kirsten?
So the zoning bylaw does have minimum parking requirements. So we're not at that detailed stage yet for the exact numbers. It is based on gross floor area. So we would work with Deborah and the current building owner to understand what the number is. But yes, you could technically park, what it would be called tandem parking. Now it's not a typical layout, but tandem parking is found, and we would probably look to have that as the approved parking layout for any required parking spaces.
Okay, thank you. Just bear with me as I find where I was in the queue. Okay, how would seniors access all those stairs?
Oh, that's a good question, but I don't think we're allowed to do anything on the outside unless we get permission from the city. But that's a really good question. Maybe Jeff Leeper can answer that question.
I think it's one we'll take back and look into.
It is a good question. I don't know whether, yeah, I think Devorah is right. The heritage designation might create an issue for the accessibility on that one.
So I have the
That would
question.
be really nice to address that, though, if there was some way that we could accommodate and make it accessible for someone who would have a difficulty going up the stairs. That would be actually really nice. That would be very inclusive.
Yeah, good question for your architect.
Okay, we've had this question before. How many people are allowed in the building at one time? So if it was missed earlier, that will be determined by building code services and emergency services, specifically fire, to determine their occupancy. Okay, so if the books weren't in storage and the library was running, how many programs would be running currently?
We would have programs every day that would promote literacy.
Okay.
You know, it really depends on, you know, like if the virus is still going on now, then it's not going to be in person. It's going to be curbside pickup.
There's a similar question. How many library programs are you hoping to have? What has been discussed thus far? And yeah, how many do you hope to have in general?
We would love to have the input from the neighborhood, what they would like. And we want it. And some people are actually really excited that this heritage building that has so much significance to the community would be open to the public. That's very special.
Okay. If you are law abiding, why is it that you and your partner today remove flyers from the neighboring mailboxes, reminding them of the meeting tonight, and the flyer that you handed out did not have a link to this meeting?
I don't know who can answer that because I don't know about that.
Okay, and there's a similar question that's asking the same thing.
I mean, we gave flyers out, but the first part of the question, I don't know. We put flyers in mailboxes that if people weren't home, but I can't answer that first part because I know that a letter was sent out to the neighbors that contained falsehoods and rumors. I do know that.
Okay. So there's two questions that were similar, so I'm going to consider those.
Good.
I've read them out loud.
Yeah.
If the zoning goes through and the house is later sold, does the new zoning apply to the new owners?
Yes, so zoning is tied to land, not to ownership.
Thank you. Okay, someone says books are heavy.
Yes, they are. Yes,
in a climate where religious organizations have been targets of violence, have security aspects been considered, especially since this is a residential neighborhood?
We've never had a problem on Switzer Avenue. And many of our programs are humanitarian, non-sectarian. So books are for everybody. You know, we take the necessary precautions. We'd have an alarm system, of course. But we never, thank God, we've never really had a problem.
If this were to move ahead, and I'm probably overstepping my role as a city councillor, but our ward has seen a number of hateful incidents in the 6 years that I've been a councillor. Certainly I'd recommend a Nest or some sort of similar camera.
Oh, definitely. Inside and outside. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. We have that on Switzer too.
Okay. I think we can safely say that the library clients will not be parking on Wellington. It's already way over capacity and very difficult to find a spot, which leaves the driveway and Huron. Noted. And a similar comment saying the street is already quite busy and it's hard to find a parking space when you have people over. Okay, and a question for Jeff and I guess. Jeff, why do you not have a planner from the city on this Zoom? You seem to be asking your questions to the FOTEN rep. Before Jeff answers, we did, oh, actually, Jeff, go ahead and answer.
Yeah, so this isn't, this is not a official meeting. They haven't filed an application. So, you know, I know my planning pretty well. Every now and then it starts to get really deep in the weeds, and I know that Kirsten has some technical knowledge that that I don't. But in terms, I think the only things that I've been addressing have been questions about how zoning and that works. So I'm pretty comfortable talking about those. If they choose to move ahead with a planning application, a planner will be assigned to the file.
And we did let the planning department know about this meeting tonight. Unfortunately, they weren't able to attend. There's a lot of, balls in the air with, COVID considerations and people working from home and kids and stuff. But they were aware of this meeting, and it is being recorded for YouTube. So once a planner is assigned, they will have the opportunity to review it. And like Jeff said in the beginning, if an application moves forward and is filed and a planner is assigned, we've received a lot of notes already. You're going to want to send those notes again to the planner so that they have those comments for consideration as well. Okay. There's a comment saying the questions are not being answered at all. Doug, feel free to follow this meeting up with your specific questions, and we will work with FOTEN and Devora to try and get some clarity that seems to be missing for you right now. Apologies that you're not getting the information you're looking for, but we can continue this conversation outside of this meeting as well. And that goes for anyone, obviously.
Fiona, if I may, I think I share some of Doug's frustration. I think a lot of whether or not I'm willing to be supportive of this project depends on how busy is this going to be and how much traffic is it going to draw. And having a much better idea of the programming that is going to be available and the hours at which that's going to be and how popular you expect that programming to be is how I'm going to make my decision about, is this going to be a really busy traffic draw? And I will share Doug's frustration and pass on that tonight I'm not really getting a good sense of how busy is this going to be? Because I don't want to support something that's going to be, 7 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. 8 to 10 cars are jostling and trying to find parking all the time. But I don't have a good enough idea right now about the programming that you're going to be offering to know whether or not I have anything to base that forecast on.
Yeah, I think that would be amazing if that, unfortunately, not that many people use a library like that many hours. We imagine that it would be about 10 to 12 people a day maximum. Well, I don't see it more than that, and that's what we saw in previous years when we did have our library open. We had library hours on Wednesday night and Sundays and made it available to people. We didn't see a lot of traffic, and
so I'm hearing, for example, dance classes, right? So if the Rosemount branch of the library offers a silly dance workshop at its location, it's going to draw, 30 parents, half of whom are going to drive. A third of whom are going to drive. It's Rosemount Library. So, I'm trying to reconcile dance programs and dance classes with 8 to 12 people a day.
Yes.
Can you dig down on that a bit?
For sure. The building is not that big to have 30 people for dance classes. We're looking at probably 5 or 6 people. We would like to do programs that that are good for the community, that fall in line with the library. We're not looking to, you know, create a lot of traffic or upset neighbors. You know, we want to work with the community. I hear, you know, that you want specific numbers. I just know that in previous years when we had the library, we had it Wednesday night and Sundays to take out books, and that worked out very nicely. If we could increase some daytime hours, that would be nice also. But I don't think that it's going to overwhelm the street.
Thanks. I understand the difficult position you're being in without you know, having a full programming
Yeah.
kind of schedule in place. Yeah, we'll chat further, and I certainly encourage residents to provide me with their feedback and to sort of be precise about what the concerns are. I mean, you know, your neighbor could have a book club as of right, and I'm sure some of you probably do, that might attract you know, 5 of your friends back in the before times. And you know, that generally is not something that's considered an adverse impact on the community. Certainly no one's calling bylaw on you until the most recent regulations came out with respect to COVID. You know, but if it's you know, if it's a 20-person dance class and we start to see
No.
stuff.
We're not looking for that, and the space is not for that. Our primary focus is on books. That's what our primary focus is on. You know, we have a Zoom class on Sunday mornings on Jewish history. We get 6 people. Okay, so if that's going to be in person, that's not 30 people, that's 6 people.
Thanks. So I'll ask Fiona to continue on.
Thank you. Just because I'm going in order, at 7:49, Jeff inputted the link into the chat for the Wellington West Parking Strategy Study document. So the link is there in case anyone wants to review that document. Question, why did you choose this location?
That's a really good question. We live in the neighborhood, and we like to jog, we like to walk, and we walked by the house and we saw it for sale, and I said, oh my gosh, this would be perfect for our library. We were looking for a home for our books, our beautiful books, and we thought this would just be perfect. It just lends itself to a place of learning, a place of sharing, a place of you know, building bridges of understanding and education, and we just thought it would be perfect for a library. So that's a really good question.
Thank you. Francine has written the question, will you look into who was responsible for it? I assume this is part of an earlier conversation. Does anyone know what that, I don't think there's enough, sorry, because I'm going in order, we're getting comments from something we discussed 10, 15 minutes ago. So I'm not sure what you mean by that. Maybe you can put some clarity in the chat. Sorry about that. Okay, so 2 that I'm gonna read together. Please outline the falsehoods and rumors that you have read. And then the second one, we saw and met you in front of our door today. Why did you feel it was important to talk to us about these falsehoods in the letter before the meeting today?
Oh, just that neighbors thought that we want to move our daycare and our camp to the building, which is false. We just want to put our beautiful library into the building.
Okay, someone just has a comment. I've been to library programs and it's quite busy. What exactly is being requested? Add library to a residential zoning or change the zoning to institutional? Would institutional come with accessibility obligations, ramp, washroom, etc.?
As we noted before, the intention is to, if we go forward, to keep the residential zoning and just permit an additional library use. As Deborah had mentioned, from accessibility perspective, the building code, I think, works with heritage designations. So we'd have to look at that with heritage and building code to see what obligations there are in consideration of the heritage.
Thank you. Since the meeting has been recorded, can you share it with the planning committee? So going back, I think Jeff stepped away to go to the bathroom, so I'll field this for a second. Going back to what Jeff said at the beginning though, should an application be submitted, there will be a formal commenting period, and you're again encouraged to write comments, even if you've already written to our office, to write comments again to the lead planner on that file, CCS of course, so that they have your comments under official consideration. And then as the process progresses, at some point there will be a planning committee date. At that point, you are encouraged, should you choose so, to reach out to members of the planning committee and share your opinion on this matter with them prior to the committee. You're also invited to speak to planning committee as part of the public delegation. You'll be given 5 minutes to share your comments on the application. So to answer the question, will the recording be shared with planning committee? I don't think so, but it is available on YouTube should any member want to take a look. Sorry, Jeff.
No. So the way rezonings tend to go, the planning committee, the members of the planning committee they're simply not going to look at this until probably there is a planning report in front of them recommending approval or not. The planning, today I think we dealt with 8 items of planning committee. But it does raise an interesting opportunity to say, the planning committee, those of us who sit on it, are going to vote on the basis of a recommendation from the city staff as to whether or not to approve or reject a rezoning application. That's going to be looked at through the various different policies that the city has. Tonight, we're not really delving into, does this meet the intent of the official plan? Does this meet the intent of the provincial policy statement? Does this meet the intent of the zoning bylaw with respect to where things are located? When and if it gets to the point where the planner is trying to make a decision as to whether or not this meets the city's comprehensive plans and policies in place, the arguments are going to become more about planning policy than not. Parking pressure and demonstrating that something may or may not create an adverse parking pressure is absolutely a consideration, and I'm certain that that will be something that the city planner will evaluate. But we are a long way away from the point of talking to the other members of the planning committee who would really only start to get involved once there's a report on this in front of them.
Thank you. You are only able to ask people not to park on Huron. Can you guarantee any change in zoning will not increase the parking pressures on the street?
As I mentioned previously, we would look at the parking requirements as per the zoning bylaw and the size of the house, and understand what those parking requirements are. And in any application, we would have to examine that parking and speak to it. So you would see that in any planning report.
Okay, a comment. I would like to see the heritage home and zoning left as is. Question, if the library has been around for 25 years, some data would be available about the number of visitors they attract? Question mark.
That's what we said. We said about 10 to 12 people a day. That's what we experienced.
A comment. During winter months, parking is not allowed on one side of the street. Won't that compound the parking issue?
It's a good question. If this proceeded to a rezoning, because it's not something that we're going to be able to answer tonight. If it were to proceed to a rezoning, it would be, the community would be inputting, I would be inputting as to what we think the parking effects are going to be, and that would be on the basis of having more numbers in front of us.
Okay. How many rooms are in the building?
So I'm going to let Deborah speak to that. She's been walking around it. I have not as of yet.
Well, there's what? 1, 2, 3. There's like 3 large rooms when you first walk in with a beautiful foyer, and then the kitchen. And then there's like a little porch. And then you go upstairs, and I think there's another 3 rooms. And then you go up another level, a lot of stairs, and another 2 rooms. I hope I got that right.
And of course, though, as we mentioned, we're at the beginning process of this, understanding what the comments and concerns are for the community. So we're still, in that research phase and understanding exactly what those programs might be. And of course, part of that is that research and discussion of those rooms within the building and how they might be used. So we're still in the preliminary stages right now.
Right.
Okay. Is it possible to generate some kind of map showing the areas that current library members live in to give an idea of whether people would drive and therefore the demand on parking? Obviously not showing specific addresses of members for privacy reasons.
That's a really good question. We have lots of members like in Westboro area, Highland Park, Hampton Park, Carlington. So, people in the neighborhood. And that's why it would be really neat if they can use public transit, they can bike, they can walk, they can jog. That's the advantage of having, a neighborhood library.
Okay. And on a similar note, as an open house, the Heritage House itself will be a draw for people and traffic, which will increase the volume of traffic.
I think we'll just take that note into consideration.
Thank you. Jeff, I can tell you when I had a book club at my house in the before times, it was hard for them to find parking on the street. Noted.
Yep.
Will it be open 6 days a week and full days?
We would like it to be open full time. Yes.
Okay, a comment if folks want to respond to it. I don't think that this building can accommodate the library and programs that it wants to run. What kind of programs only have 6 people?
Well, that's one program. That's a class.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think this is one of the main points of the conversation is that it's not a large building. So it is intended primarily as a library, to house books. And I can't speak to Deborah. Maybe you can give some more context on who runs the programs. Do you have volunteers running programs? Do you have paid staff members? I think a program, there's no definition of what a program has to be. It doesn't have to have a minimum number of people. I think it would just work if it could within the building space. And if there was sufficient people to actually run the program within that space. So
yeah, well, what we envision is having a full-time librarian who will take very special care of our very special books and to be available for convenient hours for the neighborhood to come, 10 to 12 people a day. If we could have a story time, neighborhood parents could come with their children for a story, take out books. If a university student needs to come and do research, if a senior needs to come and learn computer skills, these are all really, I think, valuable programs for the community. And it doesn't generate a lot of people, but I would say 10 to 12 people a day. That's what we envision.
Okay. Okay, we'll take one more stab at this. So Francine added from her earlier comment that we weren't sure about, says her response to my previous question about replacing neighbors' flyers was that she had no idea.
Sorry, if I may, in terms of helping me to understand, I don't have any way of evaluating what happened this afternoon, and there's certainly differing opinions there. It's not necessarily helpful to me in terms of being able to provide these folks with some advice on the planning merits and whether or not those are going to be successful moving forward. So let's move on, please, Fiona.
Okay. Huron Ave North has the advantage of being a dead-end street with many kids playing. There's so much available commercial property around us on Wellington. Why convert a residential property into a residential, potentially opening the door to more rezoning? We cannot ignore this. We cannot ignore that this will change the residential character of the street. I think there's a slight typo. I think why convert a residential property into a library, potentially opening the door to more rezoning?
I think, as was mentioned previously, every time, through this process, the policies will have to be reviewed. And if in the future another rezoning was, to be proposed, at that time, the policies would be reviewed again for appropriateness. So we can't say that this will potentially open the door to more rezoning, but as anybody in the city can do, you can apply for rezoning whenever you want, and the city can evaluate that application. With respect to the residential character of the street, because it is a heritage resource, a designated heritage resource, it cannot be changed without permission from the heritage staff through a heritage process that is public. So in that essence, it does maintain the residential character as it will be remaining and retained as it is.
Okay. We understand there is a separate living unit in the basement. Will this be maintained as a dwelling or will it be lost?
We want to use the whole building to put books in. So no one will be living in the building.
Okay. This is no longer going to be a house. It will be a library. Does the city have different numbers for library parking numbers, and are they different?
Yes, the library, so the city does have different requirements for non-residential uses. So you can look in the zoning bylaw right now, the library does have different requirements, and through a planning application, we would evaluate what those requirements are.
Okay. With the intended—
Sorry, if I may.
Yep.
Sorry, Fiona. Are you willing to make a commitment that you're not going to ask for anything different than what the bylaw requires? That any application you make is going to be strictly on the use?
Well, I think one of the important things we have to recognize is that, because there are no changes proposed to this, like I said, we're in the preliminary stages. I haven't calculated the GFA of what this building is and what that would look like in terms of requirement based on the current requirements as per the zoning bylaw. So I can't make a commitment because I actually haven't run the numbers yet.
Okay, because what I can say is, I personally would probably not be in support of any application that requests reduced parking. So maybe when we chat again, you'll have some idea of that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, just also checking in now, it's 8:15. I have like 7 or 8 more questions in the queue. We'll take questions until 8:30. With the intended street construction and wider sidewalks plus speed bumps, is it not possible that the city might designate parking only on one side of the street year-round as opposed to the winter parking restrictions in place now?
That's largely in the hands of residents. As far as I know, the street rebuild is not triggering any changed parking other than potentially some lost parking due to bulb outs and such. If neighbors on the street wanted to reduce parking or change the regulations to restrict it to one side only, there's a petition process that residents can undertake, and then I sign off on any petition that successfully gets the required threshold, which is 66% of people supporting. So if residents want to change the parking regulations on the street, it's in your hands, and that would be a separate discussion from a theoretical rezoning application.
Thank you. Okay. General comment, I do not support this rezoning request. Followed by, I think a different property would be more appropriate. And another comment, I do not support this zoning request as well. Someone else is reiterating that they are not in support. In 2015, your lending library was 38.8 square meters, according to a Committee of Adjustment application. That's roughly 420 square feet. How much space will it take in the new building? The house is much bigger than that. You want to fill the rest of the house with programming? Question mark.
So that is not correct information. Our property on Switzer Avenue is over 2,000 square feet. I don't know how many meters that is. And it was a combined preschool and library use. So the whole building was used for library and preschool. So that information is not correct.
Okay. Okay, and just some concluding comments. This building does not seem appropriate for the use being described. We do not support the rezoning. Devora, it seems like you have fallen in love with this beautiful building, but it isn't ideal to fit the library plus needs. We love our street and our community and want to keep it as it is. We do not support this rezoning as well. And then, sorry, someone just followed up from the previous comment. The information about the space of the library was in your C of A application. I have not made up these figures.
Maybe it was for a possible expansion on Switzer Avenue, but the library was 2,000 square feet.
Okay.
It wasn't 420 square feet, so that is not correct.
Okay, I have no more questions in the queue, but I'll give it a second. I'll give it a second to see if there's any last comments. Okay, one just came in. General comment, I would find a library an attractive amenity to have on the street, although there are some details about the proposal that are unclear right now. I find it reassuring that the house is a heritage property, so additional rezoning, for example, to commercial would probably be hard to get. Okay. I'm waiting for more. I don't see anything quite yet. Jeff, do you want to start some wrap up?
Yeah, no, it's been a good discussion. I appreciate hearing the questions that were posed, which interestingly are the same questions I have. I didn't hear any sort of areas of concern that were all that surprising to me. And I have some more insight tonight as a result of the questions that you've asked and some of the answers that were proposed in terms of what the community's concerns are. I know many of you have sent me notes. Feel free to follow up on those notes on the basis of new information. I haven't taken a close look at the feedback that's been provided so far, since it isn't informed necessarily by what's been discussed here, but I certainly will scan those. But certainly I will pay very careful attention to the feedback that's provided to me on the basis of what you heard at this meeting. There were a couple of things I heard that come down to sort of outside the purview of what zoning can do. I hadn't heard the security concern previously, and I think that that's something that needs to be looked at. So I'll just leave it there. I need to sit back and think and read the notes that you'll be sending me over the next couple of days. Please do have me some notes sent by, call it Monday evening. With your thoughts. And as I say, I'll be providing some advice to the applicant. I'm happy to be transparent about that advice. If you want to provide, if you write me an email and just make a note that you'd like to be informed of next steps. And then the proponent is going to make a decision as to whether or not they want to move ahead with an application. Once it does move into an application, if it does, that's a really defined process, and you'll have the opportunity to pose questions directly to the city planner, who are always happy to help understand the nuance of planning law. So with that, I will just leave it there. The addresses for Fiona and I are in the chat now, so we can leave that there for a little bit. And with that, I will just say thank you very much, everyone, for joining. I know it's tough times right now, and please stay at home. Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you. I'll just read out the well wishes that have come in. 165 Huron says, we wish you and your families all the best. Thank you so much to you as well. I am grateful that your organization is giving us the opportunity to hear your plan, something that could add a wonderful element to our community. It is a long process, and tonight is the first step for all of us to better understand and communicate our concerns, how this could enhance our great street.
That's really nice. Thank you. Thank you. We're doing it as a labor of love. We've been involved with nonprofit for 40 years, and this is a labor of love. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, thanks everyone. I'm gonna
hop off.
I'm gonna close the meeting. Thanks.
Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Devorah. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Kirsten.